Winter in Ukraine has a cruel soundtrack. The buzz of drones overhead, then the sudden silence when the lights go out. In the past day, that pattern returned on a far larger scale as Russia launched what Ukrainian officials described as a major overnight assault, and authorities across Ukraine reported power cuts in multiple regions. For families trying to keep homes warm, for hospitals running on backup systems, and for crews racing to repair high-voltage lines, the stakes are immediate. This is not just about a single night of explosions. It is about whether the country can keep its grid standing through the coldest weeks of the year, while the war in the air keeps evolving. Ukrainian officials say the attack unfolded late Tuesday, December 23, and continued into the morning, combining drones and missiles in a broad strike package. Ukraine's Air Force reported that Russia launched more than 600 drones and close to 40 missiles. And Ukrainian forces said they intercepted many of them, though not all. Local authorities across a wide arc of the country reported explosions, falling debris from interceptions, and damage to homes and infrastructure. Russia has not provided an identical account of what was launched or what hit, but Moscow has said in past attacks that it targets military and energy-related facilities. On the Ukrainian side, officials said the focus once again was the energy system, with emergency measures triggered to prevent the grid from collapsing under sudden shocks. What is clear from multiple reports is the footprint of the strike. Ukrainian officials said impacts and disruptions were recorded across more than a dozen regions, including areas in the west and around the capital. In western regions such as Rivne, Ternopil, and Kyiv, authorities reported significant strain on the power system and urged residents to prepare for outages. In and around Kyiv, officials reported air defenses engaging targets and warned of the danger from debris. Other regions cited in reporting included parts of the north and south, reflecting a familiar Russian approach: spread the threat, complicate the defense, and force Ukraine to protect many points at once. Even when air defenses perform well, the geography alone can turn one barrage into a nationwide disruption. Ukrainian officials reported civilian casualties and injuries during the assault, including the death of a 4-year-old child, underscoring how air attacks continue to hit beyond strictly military sites. Details can vary from region to region, and some initial reports change as emergency services verify what happened. But the confirmed picture described by officials was of a night where residential areas and critical infrastructure were both affected. In southern areas, officials have repeatedly warned that ports, rail links, and industrial sites remain targets because they matter to Ukraine's economy and logistics. When power is knocked out, water and heating systems can fail. Phone towers can lose backup power, and transport schedules can slip. The damage is measured not only in craters, but also in hours without electricity, and in the strain on services that must operate through the blackout. Ukraine's grid operator has used emergency shutdowns to stabilize the system during these kinds of attacks, and Ukrainian officials said similar steps were taken again, leading to power cuts across multiple regions. The logic is grim but simple. If key equipment is damaged, or if the system becomes unstable, controlled outages can prevent uncontrolled failure. Crews then work outward from critical nodes, restoring supply where lines are safe and where the security situation allows. In winter, that race happens under pressure because demand rises as temperatures drop and because darkness comes early. The immediate question for many households is not which facility was hit, but how long the outage will last and whether the next wave will arrive before repairs are complete. This attack also fits a broader pattern that Ukraine and its partners have tracked for months, a sustained campaign aimed at electricity generation and transmission. Ukrainian officials and energy companies have said thermal plants and substations have been repeatedly struck, forcing reductions in output and driving reliance on emergency measures, imports, and rapid repairs. Reporting has described this December strike as one of the major bombardments of energy infrastructure this year, and officials have portrayed it as part of a deliberate effort to grind down resilience over time. Russia's rationale, stated in different ways at different points in the war, is that energy facilities support military production and logistics. Ukraine's argument is that the practical effect is collective punishment. because the outages fall on civilians first. Either way, winter magnifies the consequences and makes the grid itself a strategic battlefield. There is also a tactical story inside these numbers. Large drone waves, especially when mixed with missiles, are designed to saturate defenses and force difficult choices. Drones can be used as decoys, as scouts, or as strike weapons, and when launched in large batches, they can drain interceptor stocks and exhaust crews. Missiles, typically faster and harder to stop, may then be aimed at the most valuable targets, including substations, high-voltage transformers, and power plant components that are difficult to replace quickly. Ukraine has invested heavily in air defense layering, from small arms and mobile teams for low-flying drones to more advanced systems for missiles. But a wide, mixed attack tests every layer at once, and it does so across an entire map rather than one city. Ukraine's Air Force said many incoming targets were intercepted. And that kind of statement matters because it indicates the defense is still functioning at scale. But interception is not the same as zero impact. Even a small share of a large barrage can be enough to cause serious disruption, especially if hits land on a few key nodes. Debris from downed weapons can also cause fires and damage, particularly in urban areas. And when attacks are repeated, the cumulative effect can be larger than any single night suggests because repairs become more complex, spare parts run down, and crews are stretched across too many sites. This is why energy officials often talk about stabilization rather than full restoration, and why blackout schedules and emergency cuts have become a feature of wartime life. Russia, for its part, has often maintained that it targets infrastructure linked to Ukraine's military capabilities, and in coverage of this attack, Russian statements were described as focusing on military and energy sites. At the same time, Russia has also made claims about battlefield advances in the east, including the capture of small settlements, though such claims can be difficult to confirm independently in real time. The key point is that the air war and the ground war are operating in parallel, and each influences the other. Air attacks can pressure logistics, disrupt repairs behind the front, and shape political narratives. Ground advances, even limited, can be used to argue momentum. And both sides at different moments have used these dynamics to influence the diplomatic environment. That diplomatic environment is part of what makes the timing of this strike notable. Recent reporting has described continued contacts and discussions involving the United States and other partners, with no clear breakthrough and major disagreements still on the table. Ukraine's president has argued that large-scale strikes demonstrate Moscow is not seeking peace on terms Kyiv can accept, especially when energy infrastructure is targeted in winter. Russia has insisted on conditions that Ukraine rejects as unacceptable, and each side accuses the other of prolonging the war. In this context, a massive air assault becomes more than a military act. It becomes a message intended for domestic audiences, for Ukraine's population, and for foreign governments deciding what support to provide next. Look beyond Ukraine's borders, and you see why neighbors watch these nights closely. Poland, which borders Ukraine, has repeatedly taken precautionary steps during major Russian strikes in western Ukraine, including scrambling aircraft in response to threats near its airspace, according to reporting. The risk is not that a single drone changes the war's outcome, but that repeated large attacks near NATO territory increase the chance of an accident, a miscalculation, or debris crossing borders. European governments are also tied into Ukraine's power stability through support packages, equipment deliveries, and in some cases, electricity trading and emergency assistance. Every major strike forces planners to revisit the same questions. What can be protected? What can be replaced quickly? And how to reduce the impact of the next wave. Ukraine has also continued to strike back. In reporting around this latest barrage, Ukrainian drones were described as hitting industrial and fuel-related facilities in Russia, with fires reported at sites in regions such as Stavropol and Krasnodar. These cross-border drone attacks have become a steady feature of the war, and they carry their own strategic logic, forcing Russia to defend assets deeper inside its territory, signaling reach, and attempting to disrupt the supply chain that supports the front. Moscow typically downplays the impact or emphasizes successful interception. while regional authorities in Russia sometimes confirm incidents or report damage. The exchange underscores a reality that both sides now confront. The battlefield extends far beyond trenches and includes refineries, depots, substations, and industrial infrastructure that can be targeted from hundreds of kilometers away. For ordinary Ukrainians, the immediate reality is more practical than strategic. When the power drops, the apartment block stairwell goes dark. Electric stoves stop working. Mobile networks can weaken. People queue for charging points where generators are running. Cities open warming centers and local officials urge residents to keep water, flashlights, and basic supplies ready. Hospitals prioritize backup systems. Rail and transit operators reroute or adjust schedules when traction power is unstable. None of this is new after years of war, but it is always draining, and it is especially harsh when the weather turns. The grid can be repaired, but the human cost of repeated disruption accumulates in fatigue, in lost work hours, and in the constant uncertainty of not knowing whether the next night will be worse. Economically, attacks on energy infrastructure ripple outward. Industry depends on stable supply, and even short outages can interrupt production, damage equipment, and reduce output at a time when Ukraine relies on exports and manufacturing to fund defense and maintain services. Repairs require specialized parts, including large transformers that are not easily sourced or installed quickly. International partners have provided equipment, technical support, and financial aid, but the challenge is scale. Repeated strikes force repeated rebuilding. Private energy companies have said their facilities have been hit many times since the full-scale invasion began, and the transmission operator has had to balance restoration with security constraints. The result is a constant cycle of patching, hardening, and improvisation, while trying to modernize and decentralize a system that was not designed for this kind of sustained attack. Strategically, the question is what Russia hopes to achieve with barrages of this magnitude. One aim may be to degrade Ukraine's ability to produce and move resources, including weapons and supplies, by disrupting power and transport. Another may be psychological, to show that no region is fully safe, even far from the front. Ukraine argues that such attacks are intended to break civilian morale, while Russia argues it is pursuing military objectives. The reality may include both, because electricity is dual use by nature. It keeps homes warm, and it keeps factories running. It powers hospitals, and it powers military communications. That is what makes it such a central target, and why the fight over air defense has become as important as the fight over artillery shells on the ground. So what happens next after a night like this? In the near term, it is about repairs and stabilization. Crews will restore lines, bypass damaged equipment, and bring generation back online where possible. Officials will adjust blackout schedules, and emergency outages may be rolled back as the system steadies. But the bigger question is whether Ukraine can improve its protection of key nodes faster than Russia can generate new waves of drones and missiles. That includes physical protection for substations, rapid replacement stockpiles for critical components, and more air defense coverage for the West, as well as major cities. It also includes the less visible work of electronic warfare, detection, and coordination, because the defense is not only about shooting down drones, but also about spotting them early and disrupting their guidance. Reuters +2 Financial Times +2 internationally watch the next round of military assistance decisions. Large barrages raise the demand for interceptors and for systems that can defend wide areas, not only single points. They also raise the value of cheaper solutions, such as mobile anti-drone units, radar upgrades, and electronic warfare tools that can protect infrastructure without firing expensive missiles. Watch, too, for energy support, transformers, mobile substations, generators, and financing for repairs. And watch the diplomacy, because every major strike tends to reshape the tone of talks, harden positions, and influence what leaders can sell to their public. If there is any movement toward a ceasefire concept, it will likely be tested first in the air, where both sides have shown they can escalate quickly. For now, the immediate picture is a country absorbing another major blow to its energy system and trying to keep the lights on long enough to recover before the next attack. Ukraine says power cuts have hit multiple regions, and that is the headline people feel in their homes and workplaces. Russia says it is pursuing its objectives, and between those claims is the reality of winter, where electricity is survival, and where each night can bring another wave. The coming days will show how quickly power can be restored in the hardest hit areas, whether Ukraine's defenses can adapt to the scale of these barrages, and whether diplomacy can gain any traction under the shadow of drones in the sky.